What if I told you that the biggest XRP prediction in crypto history is suddenly back on the table again? For years, people laughed at the idea of XRP reaching massive prices like $1,000 or even $10,000. But now something huge has changed behind the scenes. Institutions are moving, Japan is expanding XRP adoption, Ripple's stablecoin strategy is growing fast, and major financial players are entering the ecosystem. This is no longer just retail hype. The real question now is not whether XRP survives. The question is how big this network can actually become. And today we're breaking down exactly what changed and why XRP holders are more bullish than ever before. The conversation around XRP reaching extreme price levels is suddenly exploding again, and this time it is not happening for no reason. Over the past few years, XRP supporters kept talking about global banking adoption, cross border payments, institutional money, and massive utility. But many investors ignored those arguments because the crypto market was focused mostly on meme coins, Bitcoin ETFs, and hype cycles. Now, the market is slowly shifting back toward real utility, and that is exactly why XRP is entering the spotlight again. One of the biggest reasons for this renewed attention is the massive institutional movement happening around Ripple and the XRP ledger. Ripple is no longer operating like a small crypto company trying to survive regulatory pressure. Instead, the company is aggressively expanding partnerships, building financial infrastructure, and positioning itself directly inside the future of digital finance. Reports this year showed growing adoption of XRP related services in Asia, especially in Japan, where financial institutions continue showing support for Ripple technology. Now, obviously, when people hear a number like $10,000 per XRP, most immediately think it sounds impossible. And realistically, based on today's circulating supply and current market structure, that target is extremely difficult in the short term. Even many bullish analysts discussing XRP forecasts are talking more about levels between 5 and 15 years over the next few years instead of 4 or 5 digit prices. But here is where the discussion becomes interesting. The real reason people are suddenly talking about huge XRP valuations again is because of one key idea: utility driven liquidity. XRP supporters believe that if the asset becomes deeply integrated into global financial infrastructure, traditional valuation models may no longer apply in the same way they apply to speculative cryptocurrencies. Ripple has always pushed the idea that XRP can function as a bridge asset between currencies, helping banks move money instantly across borders. Instead of waiting several days for international transfers through the old banking system, XRP transactions settle within seconds. That efficiency becomes very attractive when trillions of dollars move globally every single year. Now, combine that with the growing tokenization trend. Financial markets are moving toward tokenized assets, tokenized real estate, tokenized bonds, tokenized commodities, and digital settlement systems. Ripple executives and analysts connected to the XRP ecosystem believe this sector could become enormous over the next decade. Some recent reports connected to XRP discussions mention projections involving trillions of dollars in future blockchain settlement activity. Another major factor changing sentiment is regulation. For years, the SEC lawsuit created uncertainty around XRP in the United States. Many exchanges delisted the asset, institutional investors stayed cautious, and retail confidence weakened. But now the regulatory environment looks very different from what it looked like during the darkest moments of the lawsuit. Multiple analysts now believe XRP is entering a stronger legal and institutional phase compared to previous years. This matters because institutional money does not move into assets surrounded by regulatory chaos. Large financial firms want clarity, compliance, and predictable rules before they allocate billions into digital assets. As legal uncertainty fades, XRP becomes easier for institutions to consider seriously. Then there is the ETF discussion. Many investors are focusing on the possibility of XRP related investment products attracting institutional capital over time. Analysts have repeatedly connected ETF potential with future XRP price expansion. At the same time, Ripple's stablecoin strategy through RLUSD is creating another layer of excitement. Stablecoins are becoming a critical part of digital finance infrastructure because they allow fast settlement while maintaining stable value. Ripple entering this sector signals that the company is trying to build a complete financial ecosystem instead of relying only on XRP speculation. Japan's expansion around RLUSD recently became one of the biggest stories in the XRP community because it showed serious institutional confidence in Ripple's infrastructure. So when people ask why XRP believers suddenly sound more bullish than ever, the answer is simple. They believe multiple pieces are finally coming together at the same time: institutional adoption, legal clarity, stablecoin integration, tokenization, banking partnerships, and global payment infrastructure are all moving in the same direction. That does not automatically mean XRP is going to $10,000 tomorrow, but it does explain why the conversation around XRP has changed dramatically in recent months. One of the biggest reasons XRP supporters believe something massive is happening right now is because the global financial system itself is changing faster than most people realize. For decades, international banking operated through slow and expensive systems that required multiple middlemen to complete even simple transactions between countries. Businesses had to wait days for settlements, banks paid huge liquidity costs, and cross border transfers remained inefficient despite all the technological progress happening around the world. This is exactly the problem Ripple has been trying to solve from the very beginning. While most crypto projects focused on hype, NFTs, meme coins, or speculative trends, Ripple continued building payment infrastructure aimed directly at financial institutions. That strategy is now becoming much more important because governments, banks, and corporations are finally starting to understand that blockchain technology can reduce costs and increase transaction speed on a global level. The XRP community believes this is where the real value opportunity exists. They argue that XRP is not just another cryptocurrency competing for attention on social media. Instead, they see it as a liquidity tool that could eventually support massive amounts of international money movement. Every year, trillions of dollars flow between countries for trade, remittances, banking operations, and corporate settlements. XRP supporters believe that if even a small portion of this market uses XRP for liquidity, demand could increase dramatically over time. Now, this does not mean every bank in the world will suddenly replace their systems overnight. Financial infrastructure changes slowly because governments and institutions move carefully. But the momentum toward blockchain based settlement systems is becoming impossible to ignore. Countries around the world are actively researching central bank digital currencies, tokenized assets, and faster settlement technologies. Ripple has positioned itself directly inside this conversation. A huge part of the recent excitement came after several reports suggested Ripple was strengthening relationships in Asia and the Middle East. Japan, especially, continues to play a major role in XRP adoption discussions. Financial groups connected to Ripple have repeatedly shown strong support for XRP based infrastructure, and many investors believe Asia could become one of the largest regions for blockchain payment adoption over the next decade. Coinpaper.com. At the same time, Ripple's expansion into stablecoins through RLUSD has completely changed the conversation around the company. For years, critics claimed Ripple depended too heavily on XRP alone, but now Ripple is building a broader ecosystem that includes stablecoin settlement, liquidity management, enterprise blockchain services, and tokenization infrastructure. That makes the company look much more like a long term financial technology player instead of a single asset crypto company. This matters because institutions care about complete ecosystems. Large financial firms are not simply looking for coins that pump in price, they want infrastructure that can integrate into real business operations. Ripple appears to understand this very clearly, which is why many analysts believe the company is positioning itself for the next phase of institutional blockchain adoption. Another major change happening right now is the growing importance of tokenization. Many financial experts believe traditional assets like stocks, bonds, real estate, and commodities could eventually move on to blockchain networks. Tokenization allows assets to become digitally tradable with faster settlement and lower operational costs. Some forecasts suggest tokenized asset markets could reach trillions of dollars in value during the coming years. Binance.com. The XRP community believes the XRP ledger could become part of this future because of its transaction speed, scalability, and low fees. If institutions begin using blockchain networks for tokenized financial assets, liquidity solutions become extremely important. That is one reason some XRP investors believe current price models underestimate the long term potential of the asset. Of course, not everyone agrees with these massive predictions. Critics argue that XRP's circulating supply is too large for extreme price targets like $10,000. They also point out that global adoption would need to reach unbelievable levels to support valuations that high. Even many bullish analysts discussing XRP forecasts are predicting far more conservative price ranges over the next few years. CoinCub.com. But XRP supporters respond with a different argument. They say people are still analyzing XRP like a normal speculative crypto asset instead of viewing it as future financial infrastructure. They believe that if XRP becomes deeply integrated into global liquidity systems, the value calculation changes completely. In their view, price would no longer depend only on retail speculation, but also on utility demand from financial institutions. Then there is the psychological factor driving the current hype. Many XRP holders waded through years of lawsuits, exchange delistings, market crashes, and endless criticism. Now they feel the environment is finally turning in their favor. Bitcoin ETFs opened the door for institutional crypto adoption. Regulatory conversations are becoming more mature, and Ripple appears stronger than it did during the SEC battle. That shift in sentiment is powerful because markets often move based on narratives as much as fundamentals. Right now, the XRP narrative is changing from survival mode to expansion mode. Investors who ignored XRP for years are suddenly paying attention again because the ecosystem looks more stable, more connected to real finance, and more aligned with institutional trends. This is why the conversation around XRP reaching extreme valuations has returned so aggressively. It is not only about price speculation anymore, it is about the possibility that Ripple and XRP may finally be entering the exact financial environment they were originally built for. Another major reason the XRP conversation has completely changed is because institutional investors are starting to look at crypto very differently than they did just a few years ago. In the past, large financial firms mostly viewed cryptocurrencies as risky speculative assets with unclear regulations and unstable business models. But after the approval of Bitcoin ETFs and the growing acceptance of blockchain technology across global finance, institutions are now entering the digital asset market at a much larger scale. This shift matters enormously for XRP because Ripple has always focused more on institutional utility than retail hype. While many crypto projects depend heavily on online excitement and short term speculation, Ripple spent years building relationships with banks, payment providers, and financial companies around the world. For a long time, critics said that strategy was failing because XRP price performance lagged behind other major cryptocurrencies during certain market cycles. But now many investors believe Ripple's long term strategy may finally start paying off. One of the biggest developments helping XRP regain attention is the growing discussion around liquidity infrastructure. Institutions moving large amounts of money need assets that can settle transactions quickly and efficiently. XRP was specifically designed to support fast cross border settlement with low transaction costs. Supporters believe this utility gives XRP an advantage in a future where digital payments become more important globally. The timing is also critical. Governments and financial institutions are now racing to modernize outdated payment systems. Traditional international transfers still involve delays, high fees, and operational complexity. Ripple's technology offers a possible solution to many of those problems. That is why Ripple continues expanding internationally, even while many crypto companies struggle with regulation and shrinking investor confidence. The Middle East and Asia remain especially important for Ripple's growth strategy. Several regions outside the United States appear much more open to blockchain payment innovation, and Ripple has aggressively targeted those markets. Japan continues to stand out because of the strong relationship between Ripple and major financial groups connected to the country's banking sector. Recent discussions surrounding RLUSD and broader Ripple adoption created even more excitement among XRP investors because they viewed it as proof that institutional expansion is accelerating. Coinpaper.com. At the same time, Ripple's move into stablecoins may become one of the most important developments for the company's future. Stablecoins are quickly becoming essential tools inside the crypto economy because they combine blockchain speed with stable pricing. Many institutions prefer stablecoins for settlement because they reduce volatility risk during transactions. Ripple entering this sector through RLUSD shows the company wants to compete directly in the future of enterprise blockchain finance. This is where XRP supporters believe the ecosystem becomes extremely powerful. Instead of relying on one single product, Ripple is building multiple layers of financial infrastructure at the same time. XRP serves as a bridge asset, RLUSD supports stable settlement, and the XRP ledger provides blockchain infrastructure for tokenization and payment applications. Investors who are bullish on XRP believe this creates a much stronger long term foundation than many people realize. Another reason excitement is increasing involves the broader tokenization movement. Some of the world's largest financial institutions are actively exploring tokenized assets. The idea behind tokenization is simple. Real world assets like bonds, stocks, real estate, and commodities can be represented digitally on blockchain networks. This could make financial markets faster, more efficient, and more accessible globally. Several analysts believe tokenization could become one of the largest financial transformations of the next decade. Reports connected to blockchain finance continue mentioning trillions of dollars in possible tokenized asset value over time. Binance.com. XRP supporters believe the XRP ledger could benefit directly from this transformation because of its fast settlement speed and low transaction fees. If tokenized financial assets require global liquidity movement between networks and currencies, XRP could potentially play a role in facilitating that liquidity. Now, this does not guarantee massive price increases overnight. Many experts remain cautious about extreme XRP predictions because crypto markets are still volatile and unpredictable. There are also competitors in the payment and blockchain infrastructure space, including stablecoins, central bank digital currencies, and other blockchain networks trying to solve similar problems. But what changed recently is the level of seriousness surrounding the conversation. XRP is no longer being discussed only by retail traders on social media. Institutional analysts, financial firms, and blockchain infrastructure experts are increasingly discussing the same topics Ripple has been talking about for years. Faster settlement systems, tokenized assets, global liquidity, and digital payment infrastructure are becoming mainstream financial discussions. The legal environment also continues improving compared to previous years. During the SEC lawsuit, XRP faced major uncertainty in the United States. Many exchanges removed the asset, institutional involvement slowed, and negative sentiment spread across the market. But as the legal situation evolved, confidence gradually returned. Many investors now believe Ripple survived the hardest phase of regulatory pressure and emerged stronger. KuCoin.com. This matters psychologically because investor confidence often drives long term adoption. Institutions do not want to build on technology surrounded by unresolved legal risk. As clarity improves, XRP becomes easier for businesses and financial companies to consider for future infrastructure planning. And then there is the social momentum factor. Once narratives start changing in crypto, markets can move extremely fast. Right now, the narrative around XRP is shifting from doubt and survival toward expansion and institutional relevance. That does not mean every prediction will come true, and it definitely does not guarantee a $10,000 XRP, but it explains why excitement is growing so quickly again. For many XRP holders, the biggest change is simple. They believe the world is finally moving toward the exact financial future Ripple has been preparing for all along. One of the most important things happening right now is that XRP is no longer being viewed only as a cryptocurrency. More investors are beginning to see it as part of a much bigger financial transformation that could reshape how money moves around the world. This shift in perception is exactly why extreme price predictions are returning again, because supporters believe XRP's future value may eventually depend more on global utility than normal crypto speculation. For years, the crypto market was driven mostly by hype cycles. Coins exploded in price because of memes, influencer promotion, or temporary trends. But as the market matures, institutions are starting to focus more on projects that solve real financial problems. Ripple has spent years building infrastructure for payments, liquidity, and settlement systems instead of focusing mainly on retail excitement. Now, many investors believe that strategy is becoming more valuable than ever. The global payment industry itself is enormous. Every single day, banks, corporations, governments, and payment providers move huge amounts of money across borders. Traditional systems often involve delays, expensive fees, and multiple intermediaries. Ripple's entire business model is based on improving that process through blockchain technology. XRP supporters believe that if Ripple captures even a small share of this market, the long term impact on XRP demand could become very significant. What makes the current situation different from previous years is that global finance is finally becoming more open to blockchain integration. Central banks are researching digital currencies, financial institutions are experimenting with tokenization, and governments are discussing new digital payment frameworks. The environment that once looked impossible for crypto adoption is now slowly turning into reality. Ripple's position inside this transition is one reason many analysts remain optimistic about the company's future. Ripple has continued expanding partnerships globally while also strengthening its ecosystem through new products and infrastructure. The company's stablecoin initiative through RLUSD created another major layer of institutional credibility because stablecoins are becoming increasingly important for digital settlements and financial operations, coinpaper.com. Stablecoins are especially important because they reduce volatility during transactions while still benefiting from blockchain efficiency. Ripple entering this market shows that the company understands where financial technology is heading. Many XRP supporters now believe Ripple is building a complete financial ecosystem rather than depending entirely on XRP alone. This ecosystem approach matters because institutions rarely adopt isolated products. They prefer integrated systems that can support multiple business needs at once. Ripple appears to be positioning itself exactly in that direction by combining liquidity solutions, blockchain settlement, tokenization infrastructure, and stablecoin services together. At the same time, excitement around tokenization continues growing across the financial world. Large financial firms increasingly believe that real world assets could eventually move onto blockchain networks. This includes assets like real estate, government bonds, commodities, stocks, and private financial instruments. Some forecasts connected to blockchain finance suggest tokenized asset markets could eventually involve trillions of dollars globally. Finance.com. The XRP community believes the XRP ledger could play a role in this future because of its speed, scalability, and low cost transaction structure. If blockchain networks become central to future finance, liquidity movement between assets and currencies becomes critically important. XRP supporters argue that XRP was specifically designed to help solve that problem. Now, obviously, this is where the debate becomes extremely intense. Critics continue pointing out that price predictions like $10,000 per XRP would require extraordinary adoption and valuation levels. Even bullish analysts discussing XRP price potential usually focus on much lower targets during the next market cycles. CoinCub.com. But supporters believe most people are still underestimating the scale of global finance itself. They argue that if XRP becomes deeply integrated into institutional settlement systems, the asset may operate under completely different economic dynamics compared to traditional speculative cryptocurrencies. Instead of depending only on retail trading demand, they believe XRP could eventually derive value from utility based liquidity demand. Another huge factor behind the renewed excitement is the possibility of broader institutional investment access. After Bitcoin ETFs gained approval, investors immediately started speculating about future crypto investment products connected to other major digital assets. XRP frequently appears in those discussions because of its large market presence and growing regulatory clarity. Analysts have repeatedly mentioned ETF speculation as a potential catalyst for future XRP demand. MEXC.com. Institutional access matters because large investment firms manage enormous amounts of capital. If XRP eventually becomes easier to access through regulated financial products, market participation could expand significantly. This does not guarantee massive price movements immediately, but it increases the long term growth potential of the ecosystem. Then there is the emotional side of the XRP community itself. XRP holders spent years defending the project during lawsuits, criticism, exchange delistings, and market uncertainty. Many investors who stayed through those difficult periods now feel validated because Ripple survived one of the hardest regulatory battles in crypto history. That survival story is creating powerful momentum inside the XRP narrative. Instead of focusing only on legal risk and uncertainty, the conversation has shifted toward expansion, adoption, and institutional growth. Markets often react strongly when narratives change direction because investor psychology plays a huge role in crypto cycles.